When we talk about things, how do our words actually, point? We do it thousands of times a day, but the mechanism behind it, what linguists call reference, is way more surprising than you'd think. And honestly, getting it right is the secret to avoiding a ton of misunderstandings. So let's dive in.
Just think about that for a second. If I walked up to you on the street and just said, "She called," what's the first thing you'd ask? Probably, who is she, right? That one little word, all by itself, could be pointing to billions of people. And that ambiguity, that little puzzle, is exactly what we're talking about today.
Now here it is. This is probably the single biggest idea in this whole explainer, and it might just flip how you think about language. We all kind of feel like words have a direct special link to things out there in the world. But the truth? They don't. Words are just tools. It's people who do the referring.
So let's make that our golden rule for everything that follows. We're going to keep coming back to this idea. People refer, not words. This is absolutely crucial if we want to understand how we actually manage to create meaning with each other.
And the most important word in that definition? It's act. Reference isn't some passive feature of a word just sitting in a dictionary. Nope. It's a dynamic action. It's a speaker or a writer actively using language like a pointer to help a listener pick out one specific thing from all the other possibilities in the universe.
Okay, so if we're the ones doing this act of pointing, what tools do we actually have in our language toolkit? Well, it turns out we basically have three main ways we try to aim our listeners' attention at the right target.
First up, the one we all think of, proper nouns. Using a specific name like Jennifer or Chomsky or London, it feels super precise, doesn't it? But as we're about to find out, even a specific name isn't always as crystal clear as it seems.
Our second tool is the noun phrase. So instead of a specific name, we use a description like my friend, or a writer, or the cat on the mat. See the difference? We're not using a pre-made label. We're using a bunch of characteristics to help our listeners zero in on the right thing.
And tool number 3 is the pronoun. Words like he, she, it, they. These are the ultimate linguistic shortcuts. They're incredibly efficient for sure, but as we saw with our very first question, they are 100% dependent on the shared understanding between the speaker and the listener.
All right, let's get into our first big complication. Let's call it the Jennifer problem. This is where we really start to see how even our most specific-sounding tools can lead to total confusion.
Here's a mistake we all make. All the time. We hear a name like Jennifer, and our brain just assumes it points to one single unique person. But in the real world, that's almost never the case. Words just don't have a neat one-to-one mapping onto reality.
And this is a perfect example of what linguists call the range of reference. A single expression, whether it's Jennifer or my friend or she, can point to a whole list of different people. The word itself doesn't choose. You, the listener, have to do the detective work to figure out which Jennifer is the intended one.
So, if our words are naturally this ambiguous, how on earth does communication even work? How do we solve the Jennifer problem? Well, there's a secret ingredient, a kind of magic key that makes it all click into place. And that key is context.
Just think about this amazing example. The phrase "the war" has no fixed meaning on its own. If you're sick in a U.S. history class, it might refer to the Civil War. But if you're talking with family in Ukraine a few years from now, it has a totally different, incredibly specific meaning. And hey, if you just walked out of a movie theater, it could even be pointing to a fictional war in Star Wars. Same words, completely different realities.
So the main point here is that context, knowing who is talking to whom and where and when, isn't just a nice little bonus, it's absolutely essential. It's the decoder ring that lets the listener slash through that huge range of reference and land on the speaker's actual target.
Okay, so context helps us solve ambiguity. But how powerful is it really? Let's push this to the limit with a wild case that proves our main rule. What happens when we need to point to something, but we don't even know its name? Well, we improvise.
Oh, we do this all the time. Hey, could you pass me the blue thing? Ugh, what is that icky stuff on the floor? These phrases are ridiculously vague, right? But they work perfectly. Why? Because we're leaning on our immediate shared physical context. You know which blue thing I mean because it's the only blue thing on the table. This is the ultimate proof that it's our shared world, not the words themselves, doing all the heavy lifting.
And sometimes we get even more creative and invent a reference that only works inside a small community. Check out this great real-world example. A group of people took a brand name, Kawasaki, and turned it into a proper name for a specific person. Mr. Kawasaki worked perfectly to identify one guy, but only because everyone in that neighborhood shared the local knowledge to make the connection.
Okay, let's put all this into practice. It's time for a quick quiz to see if you can spot how this whole reference thing works in the wild. You ready?
All right, first one. When a speaker says, my friend, who does the word actually refer to? Is it A, a specific person in the world, or B, whichever person the speaker intends for the listener to identify? The answer is B. Remember our golden rule. The word is just the tool. It's the speaker's intention working together with your shared context that actually does the referring.
Next question. True or false? The phrase, the war, has a fixed single meaning. Yeah, that is a big false. As we saw, its reference is almost 100% dependent on context. Without knowing the who, where, and when, that phrase is basically meaningless.
So, if you take just one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. Reference isn't like a dictionary definition set in stone. It's more like a live, collaborative dance between a speaker and a listener. They're using words and context together to make sure they're both pointing at the same thing. And understanding that dance is what makes us clearer, better communicators.
And that leaves us with one last really fascinating question. We've seen how context helps anchor words like the war. But what about words whose entire meaning is context? You know, words like here, now, or tomorrow are totally impossible to understand without it. But that's a story for another time.